Good morning. 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 Good morning, and welcome to the Pink Robe Chronicles. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Especially for those of you that are new and this is your first time. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am the Reverend Dr. Melva L. Sampson. I'm the curator and the creator, the digital griot, the pastor of this spiritual gathering, and we welcome you to this place, this virtual space where we engage in truth telling and wisdom bearing. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. My glasses are filthy. I have a cleaner around. Good morning, good morning, good morning. If you would click like and share and invite your folk on this morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Come on into the space. For those of you who, good morning, are interested in joining our clearing, our actual digital hush harbor, Ashe, where we go to talk back to the text. I've put the link. It is usually right after we've complete PRC. Good morning to those of you who are over on YouTube. Good morning to Joel. Good morning, and Baranda and Adajoke and Mike's girl. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to those that I see over here on Facebook, to Yolanda and Angel and Akila. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning to you. To Chayla and Antoinette and to Kim and to Angie. Good morning, Natasha Hart and Dana. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, Alafia. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Donna and Tracy Lynn. Listen, it's just us this morning. So we are going to go ahead and get started. One, because we're going to move to the clearing a little early this morning, because I actually have to go to the building. Our daughters are dancing this morning, and so we have to get up and get out and get to the building. Good morning, Dr. Walker Barnes. And so we have to get up, get out, and get to the building. So I want to make sure that we have a little bit of time over there in our clearing where we talk back to the text. I have placed the link in the chat, both on YouTube and in Facebook, for those of you who are interested in joining the clearing. The clearing is a private digital community with private access to one another, where we can be a little bit more intimate in our conversation, work through text a little bit more intimately, take our time, unpack some things. While it may feel therapeutic, it does not suffice for therapy. It is not a therapy session, Ashe, although sometimes it may feel that way. And for us, it is important that folks place their mental and emotional, spiritual care at the top of their list, right? And so it is a place, while there are mental health professionals there, they are there for their own spiritual well-being. And so we invite you, as I said again, to come over to join us. There is a nominal monthly fee to gain entry into that space, and so we welcome you. I want to do something that we do just organically here. That we thank you, Auntie Angie. Good morning, Mia Douglas, Barbara Bergen, Jamie Edie Chisholm, and Raquel Richardson, and Kanita McGee, and Cheryl Little, and Rihanna Roby, and Ardella Smith Reed. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Glency. Good morning, good morning, good morning. There is something I want to do with us that we do, as I said, organically already. We already preach together. We already engage in sermon development and sermon writing. It is a way that more and more is more organic to me, more organic to my spirit, and I think more humane. Good morning, Dr. Byron, and more humane. When I say more humane, I mean the processes that we often engage in to bring forth words for the community is very Eurocentered. It is Eurocentric. It is individualized, suggesting that the way that we get higher knowledge is to be off by ourselves. And it is, I guess, if this is the Jesus model that some engage, when Jesus goes off to himself in the garden and other places. But Jesus actually is not totally by himself in these places. He has taken other people with him, and they are in vicinity. And while it is not spoken or written into the text, I think that may be intentional, or it could have possibly been left out for those who are recording the stories from those whom they were hearing it from. It is impossible for me to think someone with such a heavy burden, with such a heavy message to share, would not bounce that off of, I say, would not engage in conversation with those with whom he is around. And actually, that's not true, because when he did go up to the mountain to in the Transfiguration, he had conversation with those that he had taken with him. Good morning, Dr. Di and Gail and LaWander and Naisha. Good morning, Brookline. Good morning. And so the pressure, it's the pressure. It's the pressure. I'm not interested in bringing undue pressure on myself to fulfill what other folks believe is the model, or at least how we have been trained to see a model. It also, and I keep saying this until folk get it, it also, this way of being, good morning, Reverend Rizola, it should not be taken for unpreparedness. I just, when that argument is lodged, it reeks of a kind of epistemic privilege or epistemological privilege, by way as a kind of epistemic privilege that really highlights or places in a hierarchical position how some people come to know and generate and or disseminate information. Pink Robe Chronicles, myself and others debunk all of this. The way that this comes out debunks all of this, and each Sunday I grow more and more comfortable with leaning into this. And it would be my hope that others would take the pressure off of themselves, take the pressure off of being a leader, meaning that one has to lead individually. But what does it mean for us all to come up with, to develop, to get what we need? Now, there are those of us who have a level of training that others don't. And so we can maybe guide the conversation, influence the conversation, alert folk to different things that may be happening. But this idea, this whole notion that it's me, that I have the answer, that I have the notion, that I have it, and that it is the very thing that some of us in our pedagogy, our way of teaching, debunk. when we, when we lift up the names of Paulo Freire or bell hooks, that we talk about how we are not or do not support a banking model of method of education wherein we stand at the top and we just give you information, give you information, right? So we say that. We say in our teaching philosophies, for those of us who've applied for these positions, we say that this is our pedagogy, but again, it is not the way that our system is set up, or at least we don't do it. And that is especially true in the Black church tradition. And all of this is a foregrounding for where we're going. And it should also be said that in this foregrounding, that our oral tradition is really counts on. The beauty of our oral tradition is because it highlights, it lifts up, and it counts on a call and response, Ashe. Not just a simple, amen, go on, preach it, but an actual call and response, that our tradition is not simply one, but it is the collective that gathers together. So having said that, there is a text that I'm working through this morning, that I've been working through for a while now, just bit by bit, because that's these days how sermons come to me, meaning that it feels overwhelming for Melva, not for anyone else. For Melva, if I can just talk about Melva for a minute, it at times feels overwhelming to take one text and to have to literally, in whether it's over a week or overnight, or to just deal with it in one sitting or a few sittings. And so what does it look like when we take one text and take it bit by bit? Come on, Anne Lamott, bit by bit, piece by piece, and break it down to the point where we are all able to engage it together. And so that's what I want to do this morning. Good morning to those of you that have joined us. I want us to engage. We have missed you too, Kanita. I want us to engage, and for those well, I won't put any disclaimer. I want us to engage. We're going to engage this text together. So you're going to be putting your comments in the chat. You're going to be typing your comments out. I want us to look at this text bird by bird. Thank you. I want us to look at the text that is found in Mark, the Gospel of Mark. Good morning, Devon, all the way from Bahrain, United Arab Emirates. Good morning. Good morning. And I have my stand set up a little awkwardly. Good morning, Dean Jones, all the way from South Africa. Can you text her what we need, please, right now? You know what I'm saying? Here, I'll give it to you. I want you to text her right now. Hold on. I got to give my spouse something. 1 second, y'all. Hold on, y'all. You can go take a picture of it, of the original. Good morning. All right. Dean Jones, Deacon Derek Young is about to text you right now. Because it's important. She's waiting. Good morning. Okay, back to it. All the way we in South Africa this morning. We are in Bahrain. And so I want us to look at the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark. Happy birthday, Devon from Bahrain. Good morning. Happy birthday. The Gospel of Mark, beginning in chapter 1, verses 21 through 27. And listen for the reading. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, he, being Jesus, entered the synagogue and taught. The people were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as teachers of the law. Just then, a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," said Jesus sternly, "and come out of him." The impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching and with authority? He even gives orders to impure spirits and they obey." The people were so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching and with authority? He even gives orders to impure spirits and they obey." Now, I have tagged this "Drive It Out." But by the time we get finished engaging together, we will see what actually comes out of this. So let's just begin with a little bit of exegesis of background. So we know, well, some of you may not know, but this gospel is the framework for Matthew and for Luke. Mark, it is a commentator suggests that Mark's gospel are the hearsayings or the stories as told by Peter. So Mark is recording the words and not necessarily the chronological order, or but and not sort of a linear way, but these anecdotes that he confidence. Hey, y'all just had to say hey to Confidence. We miss you. Welcome back this morning. And so Mark would have written some anecdotal some anecdotes from Peter's story. He is interpreting from Peter, and we get this from the historian Eusebius, who explains that Mark collected anecdotes from Peter, but didn't possess an ordered account from the Apostle Peter himself. This is a story of an exorcism. Just a few verses up, it is John the Baptist who actually names Jesus. In the opening of this, it is only John the Baptist who names Jesus. And what we find interesting here is that while it is only John the Baptist who states who Jesus is, it is juxtaposed against an impure spirit who also knows who Jesus is. Okay, so as Jesus just before this text, Jesus enters into he is identified by John as the one who is coming. Jesus's mission is announced. John knows who he is. Jesus is choosing his disciples, and others are coming to know, but even his disciples are not super sure who he is, the work, because he is not fully revealed who he is yet. He just says, "Come follow me and I'll show you a way." And as they are following, as they enter into the synagogue so that Jesus can teach, Jesus is met by what is noted here as an impure spirit. And the impure spirit, well before the disciples already know who Jesus is. That's really important, and we need to come back to this. They say, "We know who you are, Jesus. You are the Holy One of God." This formula alerts Jesus that the power by which Jesus heals and teaches is a function of his unique relationship with God. So Jesus is, what we can be clear through this, that Jesus is teaching, it says, by authority. Because he taught as one who had authority and not as teachers of the law. Here is something that we should pay attention to. What does by authority mean here? By authority means here it is highlighting Jesus's unique relationship with God, that Jesus is teaching under an authority, under a power that is displayed by this unique relationship with God that is not displayed by the scribes who are the teachers of the law. Jesus is coming with something different. Jesus is coming with a different view. But friends, Jesus' teaching is a threat. Jesus' teaching poses a threat to the tradition. The tradition is to be taught by law. My goodness. My goodness, that the tradition is to be taught to use the law to teach, to follow the law. But Jesus, his teachings, the way that his teachings are coming through, are different. There's a different spirit to it. There is a level of power that is attached to it, that it is not contributed to rote memorization. Come on, let's drive it out. Let's drive it out. And so it should also be clear that in the text, in the Gospel of Mark, what we also find is that Jesus, or Mark's Gospel, I should say, is written what is called during, I believe it's the Syro, during a Syro-Palestinian, within a Syro-Palestinian context, correct, Ashe. And in this context, right, because these Gospels are written long after Jesus has already walked the earth. This is important to know. So Mark would be writing this, of course, if he's getting it from Peter, then Jesus is already gone from the earth. Mark would be writing this in this context, and Mark would be writing this in the context of Roman Gentile Christians. Jewish Christians, and then Roman Gentile Christians. And it would have been in the midst of Roman house churches that were very diverse, right, in terms of their line of thinking. And these diverse house churches would have been set up in different silos. And the point of the gospel being written is because those Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians, right, because Jewish Christians would have been around in the 40s after the death of Christ, and then Gentile Christians, I think, don't quote me on these dates, would have become the majority around 70 something after that death. But the point of the gospel is that the Christians are suffering under empire. I hope I'm getting this out. They are suffering. And so Mark is writing this in a response to those who are believing. And Mark begins with talking about providing for us an example of one who teaches with authority. And what better way to talk about authority than to lift Jesus up as an exorcist? Because the exorcism story highlights and demonstrates the authority of Jesus's word. Come on, y'all. Are y'all going to help me do this? Yes. So we have in this text the afflicted person and the exorcist. The afflicted being, or the afflicted spirit, not the person, but the afflicted spirits and the exorcist. So I want to talk, let me give you the way that the common way to I want to deviate. I want to deviate. I want to bring in a different view, a different kind of interpretive lens. If that's all right. If that's all right, just put in the chat. That's all right. Let's go. I'm going to wait for you so we can get a little going back and forth. So I'm not the only one doing all the talking. Ashe? And let me say a word as you are typing here. Let me say a word about this demons and spirits and all that. Let's talk. Demons in this text, and according to the commentators in the New Interpreter's Bible, demons typically take over the personality of their victim and attempt to resist the exorcist's efforts to expel them. Then the exorcist is breaking the power up because, who is Jesus in this point? Because he is coming to redeem the people. The exorcism indicates what it means for the kingdom of God to draw near. So the authority here is God's power. The amazement over Jesus's powers does not mean that the people believe in him, because there is danger in having one who negates, right, the truth, or one who negates the tradition as an exorcist. Let's now put this lens. Let me go back to see. Gail, perhaps that is why the impure spirit know Jesus, because those spirits saw Jesus' spirits and knew who he was in authority. Ashe, 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 ashe. Okay, so let's do this. Because here's where I really want to go with this. I want to put this in the context of an Afrocentric, Afrofuturist cosmology. Let's go. I want to now that we sort of gotten this traditional kind of theme out, I want to put this in the context of an Afrocentric, Afrofuturist cosmology. In an Afrocentric, Afrofuturist cosmology for Melva, an unclean spirit is understood as a manifestation of disrupted cosmic harmony, often resulting from the residue of historical traumas inflicted upon African peoples and their ancestral lands. These spirits are remnants of colonial oppression, slavery, and cultural erasure, which linger in the collective consciousness, seeking to perpetuate discord and imbalance. I want to read it again. I told you I did a little bit of work on it. I want to read it again. In an Afrocentric, Afrocentric, let me break that down for some of you for whom this is your first hearing of this. Afrocentric, as we get from the father of the term, Dr. Molefi Asante, to be Afrocentric is to consider yourselves a subject in a world that has so often objectified you. To be Afrocentric is to take first African diasporan history, culture, values, and spirituality, and to begin from that as your starting point, from that as your interpretive lens, that you are Afro-centered, that everything that comes, that everything you think of, all of your ideological views, your methodological approaches begin first by centering this particular perspective. An Afrofuturist or Afrofuturism is the lens by which African diasporan people use technology, use speculative fiction, use art and aesthetics and the healing arts to future ourselves, to see ourselves in the distance. And why is that so phenomenal? It is phenomenal because for African diasporan bodies, our bodies are always threatened for us to see ourselves beyond captivity. Yes, blackity black. For us to see ourselves into a future beyond captivity, beyond the gaze of dominant culture, is a revolutionary act. So when I, as a womanist, for my brand of womanism, is inclusive of both Afrocentrism and Afrofuturism, right? As a new African womanist, that Afrocentrism and Afrofuturism are inherent in womanism. Cosmology, let's talk about that real quick. Cosmologies are the way that we talk about the universe, the cosmos, that there are various kinds of cosmos or cosmologies, because cosmologies are gathered, because the way we talk about cosmologies it goes according to who is talking about it. So you all know that if I am an Afro-centered, Afro-futurist womanist, then I am calling on various kinds of African-centered, and even Afro folk, African-American folk cosmologies, which would be ways of looking at the universe. And then I take those ways of looking and place them on top of looking at the biblical text, at sacred texts, so that my lens then is not a traditional Euro-centered, informed, influence lens, and not only coming through my lived experiences as a Black woman, but also gleaning and leaning upon going back to get what was lost. That's a cosmology, Sankofa. But gleaning on the ancient wisdoms, right? This is called sacred memory. Mama Iti Hari teaches us about these sacred memories, which is how we go to retrieve the philosophies, the theologies, the cultures, the beliefs, and the ancient wisdoms of our ancestors across the diaspora to inform our present thinking and teaching. Ashe. Good morning, Attorney Francis Johnson. Drinking your black coffee with all the black preaching Melvin Sampson is pouring. Ashe. So let's go back. So we are going to take Mark chapter 1, verses 21 through 27. We are talking about driving it out, and we are going to now place it within an Afrocentric, Afrofuturist, womanist cosmological lens as we unpack what an unclean spirit is. Are we there? I'm going to wait till y'all type we're there. Let me go look over here. Okay, somebody said we're there. So, Ashe. I'm going to start from the beginning. In Afrocentric, Afrofuturist cosmology, an unclean spirit is understood. Ooh, Shonda, you just gave me an idea. An unclean spirit is understood as a manifestation of disrupted cosmic harmony, often resulting from the residue of historical traumas inflicted upon African peoples and their ancestral lands. These spirits are remnants of colonial oppression, slavery, and cultural erasure, which linger in the collective consciousness, seeking to perpetuate discord and imbalance. Listen, the demonic in this framework represents the systemic forces of oppression and exploitation that have plagued African communities for centuries. These forces manifest not only in individual actions, but also in institutionalized forms of injustice, such as racism, economic exploitation, and environmental degradation. To confront these entities, Afrocentric, Afrofuturism, and womanism emphasizes the importance of reconnecting with ancestral wisdom, reclaiming cultural identity, and envisioning liberatory futures rooted in African spirituality and indigenous knowledge. Through rituals, storytelling, preaching, and collective action, communities then work to banish these unclean spirits and dismantle the systems of oppression they present, paving the way for a more just and equitable world. So, in a decolonized, Afrocentric, Afrofuturist interpretation of Mark 1, 21 through 27, Jesus embodies the ancestral wisdom. Come on, Jesus! Jesus embodies the ancestral wisdom and spiritual power of, for me, African traditions. Here's what his Jewish tradition, which some believe is African. Standing what? As a liberator and a healer within his community. When he encounters the man with the unclean spirit, he recognizes the deeper roots of the disturbance, Jesus today, which stem from the legacy of colonialism, oppression, and cultural erasure. Jesus's authority, Jesus's authority to drive out the unclean. I already said that, Nicole. I'll come back. Jesus's authority to drive out the unclean spirit arises from his connection to divine energy, which flows through him as a conduit of cosmic harmony and justice. By invoking the power, it says he taught by this authority that they not seen, by invoking the power not just of God, but the power that he would have gotten through the oral history of hearing about his ancestors. And we know that ancestors are important in the Jewish tradition. Hearing about the stories of his ancestors and the power of his ancestors, that when Jesus stands, even in the book of John, when he says, I know from where I come from because I know who I am, because I know where I come from and I know where I'm going. That is a direct link for me and this interpretive lens that I'm offering that tells us that Jesus has a connection with his ancestors. Now remember, I am offering an alternative interpretation here. I am suggesting that again, when Jesus encounters this unclean spirit, remember, and the unclean spirit knows who Jesus is before the disciples know who Jesus is. And up to this point, only John has stated who Jesus is. But this spirit, this disturbance, this imbalance already knows the power and the authority that Jesus is coming with, already knows that it is Jesus's mission to drive it out. So when Jesus encounters the man, when he has this encounter, the man with the unclean spirit then recognizes these deeper roots. Woo! Jesus recognizes these deeper roots, which stem what? In this reading, from colonialism. So what does it mean for us to think about impure or unclean spirits and not to simply attach them to people that we've placed moral judgment over, and not simply attach them to bodily practices or disciplinary practices. That's what I meant to say. That some of us have lived under for so long, from some of our traditions, some of our more strict faith traditions that suggest that if we engage in X, Y, and Z, then we have an unclean spirit. Listen, I'm not coming for y'all stuff today because I'm already exhausted. I've been online too much this week and I'm exhausted from it. But what I am wanting to invite you to do is, what if we expanded what we mean by unclean? Yes, to the point. What if we understood unclean as a manifestation, a disruption of our harmony? And if we understood that unclean was a disruption of our cosmic harmony, of our spiritual harmony, that is often the residue of historical trauma, then maybe we wouldn't be so quick to call people unclean, and maybe we would be even faster to drive out, to place a wedge toward anything that comes to disturb our harmony. So then when I said, Shonda, you gave me an idea, it made me think, as I am the faculty fellow for the Wake Forest University Faith Compass Center, funded by Gilead, and for one of the purposes of the Faith Compass Center is to use transformative storytelling to erase the stigma that continues to be prevalent around those infected and affected, those Black people infected and affected by HIV and AIDS in the South. It is the work to eradicate, to inform, right? To inform faith communities about their toxic theological practices and interpretations, and to equip them with a more sound, a more progressive theology, so that we can heal the land. Stay tuned for more information, June 18th through the 20th, June 18th through the 20th, where we will be hosting an institute called Restoring and Restoring African American faith, sacred memory, public health, as we talk about some of these things and use this sacred memory process that I'm using right now to aid the community, to prepare the community to engage in this sacred storytelling model and method. And what would it mean then if we would help us understand what an unclean spirit really is? So then back to Jesus, again, when he encounters the man, he recognizes and when he encounters this unclean spirit, Jesus recognizes that there are deeper roots here. Baby. So what he's really calling an unclean spirit is colonization. What he's really calling an unclean spirit is oppression. What he's really calling an unclean spirit is cultural erasure. What he's y'all not getting it today. These are the unclean spirits. And the unclean spirit is lodged so deeply in the community that it doesn't want to leave. And that is why Jesus is a threat. Friends, what would it mean for us to become like Jesus and to drive out all of those interlocking systems of oppression, all of those things that create disturbance within our communities, within our spirits, all of the residue of these historical traumas inflicted upon us and on our land? What would it mean for us to drive out these unclean spirits? What would it mean for us to not be so high up in the heavenly rafters to think about sort of this mystical sort of other plane of spirit? But what would it mean for us to make this a practical response to that which oppresses us? Jesus's authority to drive out the unclean spirit then arises from what? His connection to divine energy. His connection to the divine energy which flows through him. Come on. It flows through him. Not around him. Not under him. It flows through him. Babes, what am I saying? I'm saying that the connection to you and the power source comes through your body. And this is why all of this hide me behind the cross. None of me, Lord, all of you. It's problematic. It has to come through you. It has to flow through us. So we have to drive out. We have to drive out these old tapes that keep us disconnected from our bodies. We have to drive out the ways in which many of us are still hold ourselves accountable to these problematic ways of being. And if indeed the faith praxis or the faith sits on the axis of incarnation, and guess what though, this incarnation is not new to Christianity. That's a whole nother, let me keep on this. That it flows through. By invoking the power of his ancestors and drawing on the spiritual traditions of his people, Jesus confronts the systemic forces of oppression that have taken hold of the man, restoring balance and restoring him to wholeness by saying, "Come out." My. Through, by saying, "Come out." He is restoring balance and restoring wholeness. Through this act then, later on down in the text, Jesus not only performs what comes next, a miraculous healing, but then delivers a powerful message of resistance against colonial domination and cultural erasure. His actions demonstrate the transformative his actions demonstrate the transformative potential of reclaiming ancestral witness of reclaiming ancestral wisdom and spiritual practices, empowering individuals and communities to confront and overcome the forces of oppression that seek to divide and destroy them. And the impure spirits obey him. And the impure spirits obey him. How do they obey? Like how? And the impure spirits obey him. Why? How? Because we already said that he is operating. He is operating under, yes, the authority and power of God, but also his ancestors. His ancestors, the capacities. Remember in the teaching that I shared, given by Dr. E.T. Hari Touré, that the way that we move through a collective traumas are to call upon the capacities of our ancestors. That means we would have to understand who an ancestor is, right? That the way the ancestor lived, that their attempt to live following God, that their attempt to live in living out their call of God, doing well, being in community with others, living out these principles, of this Nguzo Saba, creating unity, working collectively, engendering a purpose and creativity, restoring and storing faith, right? That is what marks an ancestor. And ancestors have particular capacities as in there are, when we invoke a name, when we say we want to call Harriet Tubman, we're not just calling Harriet Tubman's name, we're calling the capacity attached with Harriet Tubman's names. And what capacity could be attached with Harriet Tubman's name? Harriet Tubman's ability to do what? Drive out the imbalance. What would be the imbalance? Enslavement. And how would she drive it out? By being able to see a way through the wilderness, if you will, a path to freedom, by calling her people and by leading them to freedom. That's a capacity. We need strategic vision. We need strategic vision. We also, another capacity is the ability to see what others can't see, the ability to listen even when it's noisy, right? These are capacities that we need to call on in order to confront the disturbances, in order to confront the imbalances, in order to confront what we are affected with. It is really this simple and practical and plain. It is somewhat otherworldly, only otherworldly when we tap in, right? But the otherworldliness is not to take us to have us floating above this plane of consciousness, but to inform and to empower how we function on this plane of consciousness. For we know what is coming this is what was similar to what those believers would have been experiencing in the Roman Empire, to how they were suffering. You just heard that is it in Alabama? The Alabama courts have now halted IVF, in vitro fertilization, because they are considering these embryos to be babies. So those families who were relying on IVF procedures to be able to start their families have now been at a halt. This is a kind of disturbance that needs to be driven out. The ways in which Black folk and other brown folk and others and those with criminal records have been disenfranchised as it results and relates to our voting. Listen, this is the kind of impure and unclean spirit that needs to be driven out. The assault and attack on DEI initiatives in colleges around the country, suggesting that it is reverse racism, suggesting that there is no need for it. The ban on particular kinds of books by certain authors. This is the kind of unclean spirit, the kind of cultural erasure that needs to be driven out. It is high time, friends, that as we continue to go to this sacred text, as we continue to look for words to share with the people, that we offer this Afro-centered, Afro-futurist, womanist interpretive lens, that we call on the ancient wisdoms, the ancient cosmologies to help us interpret it, to help us interpret this beyond what we've been socialized to understand, beyond our Sunday school lessons, beyond our Easter speeches. But we need a grown-up interpretation. We need an interpretation that is relevant for today. We need an interpretation that will help us stand, that will help us respond. We don't need to be hanging from rafters, if you will, and be so spiritually minded that we are no earthly good. But we need to take that spiritual mindedness and make sure that we drop it into a practical container so that each and every one of us will understand that as we are facing pushback, that as we are facing tension, the tension that we are facing is because that unclean spirit knows that we are coming. Even though we may not have announced our entrance, that unclean spirit already knows that we are operating under the power of God, under the power of our ancestors, that unlike the scribes, unlike those who have held high to tradition, who teach by the law and only the law, that we are coming with the spirit. We are coming with the spirit to see what others have not seen. We are calling us into a place to bring what has been disturbed into peace, to challenge what challenges us. And we know that in doing so, they will see us and obey. Ashe. We're going to keep working on this text because there's more to be said. So don't be surprised if we come back at it again next week. Ashe, we are headed over to the clearing now. We will see you all next week. God willing, and the creek don't rise. Ashe. Ashe.